Hello, and welcome to City Inside Out Council Edition. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. The clock is ticking for the Seattle City Council to select a new member to fill a vacant District 2 seat. Plus, some state deadlines are looming as well when it comes to adding more housing and density to Seattle through a new comprehensive plan. And what questions do council members have for a new permanent police chief candidate due for confirmation hearings in just a few weeks? I'm talking with Councilmembers Cathy Moore, Alexis Mercedes Rinck, and Maritza Rivera for answers to these questions and the ones you're sending in too. Next on Council Edition.
I'm looking for someone who's going to be collaborative. We have a lot of work to do, someone who's going to be ready to roll up their sleeves.
Before SPD has the authority to utilize blast balls in a riot situation, the mayor has to give approval of that specifically.
We need a plan that will allow us to build the housing that we desperately need, and the need is dire.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out, Council Edition. Great to be back with you on Council Edition here on Seattle Channel. I'm Brian Callanan, and this month we have with us Councilmember Cathy Moore, representing District 5 in North Seattle. Great to be with you.
Thank you, Brian. Very pleased to be here.
We also have with us the newest member of the council, Councilmember Alexis Mercedes Rinck from the citywide Position 8 seat. Thank you for coming.
Excited to be back.
All right, here we go. And from District 4 in Northeast Seattle, from the UW up to Wedgwood, that's Councilmember Maritza Rivera. Great to see you, too.
Nice to see you, Brian. Thank you for having me on the show today.
You bet. Let's jump in here, and we're recording the show just after the deadline to apply for this opening on the council in District 2 after Tammy Morales stepped down. And there will be a public forum to meet the candidates on this position on or around January 21st. Be on the lookout for that. The council will make a decision to appoint this new member who will serve until late November on January 27th. So, Councilmember Moore, here we go again. The council did this last January, I know. What did you learn from that process that will influence how you make a choice this time around?
Oh, well, thank you for the question. Last time around, I didn't meet individually with all of the candidates. I thought it was important to sort of have that process be done in public. This time I've decided that it would give me an opportunity to learn a little bit more and have more of an kind of rounded sense of the person coming before me to do individual meetings with them. So I will be meeting with whoever requests to meet with me individually.
Okay.
I think just trying to listen to what the community concerns are, what the community is looking for, because it is their voice on the council. And another thing that's going to be important to me is looking at having somebody who's you know, hopefully has deep ties to the community and is really able to talk to all the diverse stakeholders and interests from that community.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Rivera, I want to go to you next. The council has discussed this idea of, okay, do we want a placeholder in this role? Do we want maybe somebody, it'd be okay with us if this person ran for the office for the permanent job in November to serve out the rest of the term? What kind of candidate are you looking for?
Thank you for the question, Brian. I'm looking for someone who's going to be collaborative. We have a lot of work to do, someone who's going to be ready to roll up their sleeves and get to working with us, someone who, I agree with Councilmember Moore, someone who's going to represent the D2 in this holistic fashion, that they're listening to folks across the district, because I have heard from some folks in the district who felt like they haven't been heard in the past, and we want to make sure everybody is heard. Like I said, someone who's willing to come in and do the work. And so really looking forward to reviewing the resumes and seeing who's interested.
Does that placeholder versus a candidate argument, does that hold, or have you made a thought on that? Or
I don't have a thought on that. It's really more someone who's willing to do the job and willing to do the work, and, you know, we'll go from there.
Okay, got it. Councilmember Rinck, you're coming into this job at a very interesting time of transition. Councilmember Morales, in leaving, made some very critical remarks about the way she felt she was treated on the council, and I know you told Publico a few weeks ago, regardless of how people feel about her or her departure, it's time for the council to take a breath, maybe try something different in terms of building a good work environment. I wanted to ask about that. How has that effort been going? How does that dynamic influence who you want to appoint to this D2 role?
Yeah, Absolutely. Well, I've been really pleased to share and pleased to say that the floor has really welcomed my team in. And I've had already opportunities to work with each one of my colleagues now on a few different issues. I know we'll get to maybe talking about blast balls in a bit, and I've been really excited to work alongside Councilmember Moore on some of that legislation. But I would say, you know, collaboration is key, and I've come forward to each of the offices to make sure that, you know, we're building that relationship and just trying to perhaps change the tone a little bit. Again, I'm new here. And so hoping that, you know, it's a new year, a fresh start, and we can move forward and have a good year and get some good work done this year.
Okay. Thanks very much for that. Councilmember Rinck, let me start with you. I'll ask a way easier question about the comprehensive plan. I'm kidding on that because this is very complex, as you know. This is the roadmap we're talking about for growth in Seattle over the next 10 years. The council recently had its first special committee meeting on this, and there's a lot of controversy here. Would this plan add too much or too little density? Would it destroy the character of some neighborhoods? Would it cut down too many trees? We had one viewer, Gabe, who wrote in with this very simple but complex question, too. What is your plan to address the current housing crisis? You're a renter yourself. I've talked about that with you. You know what it's like to pay to live in this city. How do you answer, Gabe? And maybe what's your approach to the comp plan, especially when it comes to housing, which is such a critical need?
Absolutely. Well, starting first and foremost, yes, I am a renter, and every year I've lived in this city, my rent has gone up. And that is the experience shared by, I imagine, a lot of renters in this city, which represent actually half of Seattle residents, about half are renters themselves. We need a plan that will allow us to build the housing that we desperately need, and the need is dire. And we have incredible examples now across the U.S. where we've seen cities who have stepped up and built more housing, and we've seen that reflect then in more affordability. Minneapolis is one example of a city that legalized a bunch of housing and then built a lot more, and it quickly became a lot more affordable. It now has some of the most affordable rental prices of any big city in the U.S., and between 2017 and 2022, rent actually stayed almost flat. And commensurately, they also experienced a 12% decrease in homelessness. And similarly, also in Austin, Texas, they've built a lot more housing. They've actually surpassed the demand, and now they've seen a resulting price drop. And so being able to allow for more housing to be built across the city is a real priority, and by trying to make sure we're addressing our affordability challenges for working folks.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Rivera, I'll go to you next. You've raised some concerns about the time frame of approving this plan. In June, there are these state requirements for density that are supposed to go into effect in all cities in Washington under House Bill 1110. So it feels a little bit to me like the clock is ticking in some ways. And you, I know, are getting a flood of public input on this plan right now, which one of our viewers, Philip, asked about. How will council members reconcile all the feedback they've received on the comprehensive plan? There are many channels: public email, in-person testimony, professional recommendations, etc., and many constituents who won't provide input at all. So it would be interesting to know how they prioritize each, if any. Can you help us with that thought? How do you prioritize all this different input you're getting on the comprehensive plan?
That's a great question, and one I had for the Office of Planning and Community Development at our meeting. I will say, first and foremost, I do want to say that there is, you know, everyone agrees, and when I talked to the many constituents that I knocked on doors on year before last, everyone agrees we need more housing across the city. Everyone agrees that we have an affordability issue. I am frustrated with the department for the lack of public engagement. The Growth Management Act requests or not requests, mandates, what they call early and ongoing engagement. And I feel like the department did engagement, but it was not broad engagement. And so on the back end, so close to this deadline, we're seeing constituents feeling like they didn't know what the plans were going to be. They didn't feel reached out to. They don't understand what all the requirements are. And many might not understand the requirements and mandates under HB 1110, and that is all part of what the department, that type of engagement they were doing. So this is what I've been very frustrated with on behalf of the constituents.
Yeah, and where do we go from here?
And then where do we go from here? And that was my question to the department from the dais the other day. I have been told by the department that, and also because, Brian, you know that December 20th was the last day at midnight to give public comment.
That's right.
And then on January 6th, the department shared their plans. Some of those plans, the transportation, climate, all required as part of the comprehensive plan under the Growth Management Act, we hadn't seen until they released this on the 6th.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's all frustrating. It's frustrating for us who have to review all these plans, and I like to make, and we all want to make informed decisions when we take votes, and it's frustrating for constituents who have even less information sometimes than we do. So that's all been really frustrating. Department says that they're going to review all that public comment and the various forms that came in, and then they're going to get back to us as to, I've requested, I will say personally for my district, for them to share the public comment that they've received so that I know, because I'm not getting everything they're getting necessarily since they asked constituents to email them directly as they were formulating these plans. And that makes sense because they were the ones crafting it, right? So hopefully they will be sharing with that with us soon, and we'll go from there, as you said.
Thank you for shedding some light on that. And Councilmember Moore, I want to go to you because I know you have a number of critiques about this plan, including some concerns about some proposed density in your neighborhood up in Maple Leaf. Several viewers wrote into me about that. I'm sure you've been hearing from people too. They're saying that growth should be encouraged all over Seattle. There's a little bit of pepper on these, so get ready. One commenter said this: Madrona, Queen Anne, etc. lobby against density in their neighborhoods. How much more density should go into historically redlined communities to make up the difference? Or Britt put it this way: what can be done to make sure everyone in Seattle has a place to call home that is affordable, or is it more important to maintain single-family homes and tell people that rent that housing in the city is just not an option for them, or affordable housing is not going to happen? Definitely a hot-button issue for a lot of people in Seattle. I know you have some concerns about this. Can you talk about this idea that Seattle needs more growth? It's definitely part of what the state's saying with House Bill 1110. What's your response to this in terms of this comprehensive plan you're looking at?
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, I too agree that we need a lot more growth. I was a proponent of Alternative 5 that was studied by the mayor on the campaign trail. But I was also very clear in my messaging that we need to really focus on affordability. When you look at the figures that are coming out of the Department of Commerce, you know, where they say we need 112,000 new units in 20 years, they break it down by area median income. And really where the greatest need is 0 to 60, really. And all of that housing needs to be provided through subsidy, right? The market isn't going to necessarily provide that. So while I understand and do support the need for increased, like, apartment buildings, in opening up single-family neighborhoods, I also think it's important not to necessarily conflate density per se with affordability. And that, I think my message sometimes gets misconstrued, right? We need to be opening up those neighborhoods, but we need to be opening up them in a way where we are both incentivizing housing type diversity, so we aren't having a monoculture of housing. I think if we are able to get diversity of housing, we're able to actually put forth more affordability options. You know, one of the things that HB 1110 requires is that we have 4 units in every lot, and then we can have 6 if 2 are affordable. What if we made 2 of the 4 affordable between 80 and 120%? Because we have, you know, we need to be a city where both our pizza delivery drivers, our baristas, our teachers can afford to live. I understand the need for having a significant amount of rental housing. You know, until 2017, I was basically a renter. I have rented the majority of my adult life. I understand the challenges of renting. I also understand that renting is very unstable. And so one of the things that I would really like, and I've continued to talk about and worked on this in my committee, Housing and Human Services, is how do we expand othership opportunities? And they don't necessarily need to be like a single-family home. They can be amending the condo law in Olympia, looking at other ownership models such as co-ops, expanding the use of land trusts, right, or land banks. So there are many other ways that we can encourage ownership opportunities, and I think we need to be doing that. And so that's the focus that I'm bringing to the comp plan. In terms of the more sort of micro neighborhood issues, there we have to listen to legitimate concerns about infrastructure and transit. And can they accommodate? And is there a certain level of development that's sustainable? And let's begin with that and see how it goes. One thing that I've been a little disappointed is that, you know, the existing urban villages and the regional centers were not studied And so council had to put funding in for a new EIS. And so we are not being
Environmental impact statement.
So we are not having the entire package before us. We're having to take a piecemeal approach. And so that does make it harder for us to kind of see, well, how is this piece going to affect that piece, right? Because they all are. So it's a big issue. I am very much committed to density, but density that provides true affordability options. And I think this is a great opportunity to try to expand our middle class and opportunities to enter into our middle class for our young people, to keep our elders housed as well.
Okay, thank you. I need to move on to another topic. I know there's so much more to talk about with that one, but there's a very big issue coming up here in January because the council will be holding confirmation hearings for the police chief candidate Mayor Harrell has chosen, Sean Barnes, who has served as the chief of the Madison, Wisconsin Police Department. He's coming in at a time when police hiring appears to be ever so slightly doing better, but public safety concerns, I'm thinking about areas like Chinatown ID especially, those are as high as ever. Councilmember Rivera, can I start with you? What questions do you want to ask Chief Barnes as a candidate?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say that I really want to have a great working relationship with Chief Farrar, current Chief Farrar, and I hope to have a robust working relationship with now new Chief Barnes. We have a lot of public safety issues in the district, and I want to make sure that we're going to be great partners, and he will be a great partner in ensuring focus to the D4 and the D5 and the, all across the city.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be my focus. And so I will ask questions about that, about his ideas for ensuring public safety across the city, particularly since we still only have, we are down 50% of our patrol officers in the department. So what are his plans for ensuring that he's able to, address the public safety across the city, given that fact?
Okay.
And how else we can partner? What other things does he need to help recruit and retain more officers in the departments? What other tools? As you know, we passed 11 pieces of public safety legislation last year. What other tools can we put in place?
Okay.
I am very committed to public safety. It's the #1 priority. As you know, Brian, it's the reason I ran. It's the #1 priority in the district that I represent. And it is something that I really care about and will ask him about, and hoping that we're able to get, the partnership that I've had with both, like I said, Chief Farrar and with Captain Agard, who now is Assistant Chief, and I'm so happy to hear that a woman got promoted as Assistant Chief in the department. That's really amazing, and now there will be a new captain at North Precinct, which I will also work to have a robust working relationship on behalf of the district.
I'm going to come back to one of those issues in a minute, but Councilmember Rinck, I wanted to talk to you about this because you and other council members have talked to me in the past about the need for a comprehensive public safety approach, meaning you've got police officers, you've got groups like the CARE team, and it's social service providers, other city resources too. Is that a topic you want to bring up in these confirmation hearings? I just want to know about your approach to public safety here, how you want the chief to be involved, how you want the SPD involved moving forward when it comes to public safety in the city.
Absolutely. I really like to think of public safety as a system wherein we need to have quick responses to incidents, and we need to make sure we have the right response for a given incident that may happen. We have the CARE team, we have fire, we have emergency medical, and we have police. And so making sure that we are really scaling and getting clear on what are the right things that officers should be responding to, and making sure that it's a quick response so we can make sure residents have peace of mind. But also making sure that we have an accountable body and one that really is addressing the culture challenges. So I really do want to have that discussion with this potential new chief around how he plans to address some of the very real culture challenges that unfortunately we've seen be pervasive throughout the department. I think we'd like to see real remedies to those to give residents more peace of mind, particularly communities that have experienced over-policing historically. That break of trust really affects our ability to, of course, implement quality city services across the board. And so that's something I'd like to be able to ask and talk about. And then, of course, making sure that we have an accountable body is tremendously important as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pick up on another culture of police issue, if I could. And Councilmember Moore, I'll bring you in here because there are a lot of different priorities for a new chief. One that doesn't always make the headlines is this 30 by 30 report, which focuses on hiring women as police officers. The goal is to increase the representation of women in begin police recruiting to 30% by the year 2030. So this report has highlighted some major problems in Seattle, from sexual harassment to discrimination within the SPD. How important is it for a new chief to right the ship on this issue and make a deeper cultural change at the Seattle Police Department?
Well, as you know, Brian, I began talking about 30 by 30 sort of, I think, in January when we had our first public safety meeting. So it's something that's incredibly important to me. I think it's essential. It is part of making the police force representative of the community that it serves. And most of the statistics that we have out there show that women officers do a very good job at managing conflict. They tend to use less lethal force. They're better at, you know, working with the community. So I think it's critically important. It's a big challenge.
Yeah.
You know, Interim Chief Rar she has also been a leader on 30 by 30 nationally, and I think she began to implement a number of changes. She promoted a number of women in the department, which was, she really set the table for that, and I would like to see new Chief Barnes continue with that.
Okay.
I'd like to see him address ways of, perhaps, we had talked a lot about providing care, you know, child care and family responsibility.
Yeah, places for women to breastfeed, et cetera. There's a lot of things.
But it's also like elder care,
Sure,
and if you have a sick, you know, spouse and those things. So we have to acknowledge sort of family responsibilities and looking at ways that the department can take that seriously and be more flexible. So, and then also just continuing to put forth a very strong message that sexual harassment and discrimination and kind of an old boys culture attitude is not going to be tolerated. One of the things we're looking at is like allowing some first line supervisors to discipline.
I see.
And I think giving greater authority down the line for smaller sort of infractions, it will be helpful to continue to put that message across, like we nip it in the bud when we see it.
Thank you. A lot of questions it sounds like you have for this chief candidate. I want to pick up the pace ever so slightly with you, if I could. Councilmember Moore, can I talk about soap and soda zones with you here? So stay out of areas of prostitution, stay out of drug areas. You sponsored this legislation last year on the council to help stop gun violence. But I saw this report in the last week of December. Another shooting in North Seattle. I know you saw it too, in broad daylight. Neighbors are saying this is a known pimp that fired the shots. They say the SPD doesn't have a policy in place to enforce soap and soda. Can you tell us what's going on?
Sure. So it was a complicated piece of legislation, and there were basically three pieces. There was the piece that related to loitering as to sellers, loitering as to buyers, and then there was a first-in-nation piece relating to loitering for the purposes of promoting prostitution, which was a way to target exploiters, or AKA pimps. The first piece of that, the goal of the legislation was to provide diversion for sellers. In order to do that, we need to have trauma-informed outreach and service provision. And so we needed to create a curriculum for police officers and then train them on that, and through outreach to service providers. So that's taking a bit of time to get that right, and it's really important that we get that piece right.
Okay.
In terms of the piece of enforcement against buyers, that, again, it needs to implement a policy. I truly have been frustrated with sort of the slowness of the implementation of that policy, and the fact that not all officers are aware that that is now a new tool available to them. I think that that's picking up. In terms of the first piece, first in the nation legislation around forcing, not having to require victims to bring action against pimps. That, too, is taking a little bit of time with the city attorney's office to figure out what is the evidence that the officer needs to have in order to build a successful case.
Right.
So, again, it's a bit somewhat complicated. They are beginning to work through that. But I am also beginning to light a fire under people's feet to say, I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the need to get it right, but we also have these shootings happening in broad daylight in residential neighborhoods. We have a tool in place. Please begin to utilize it soon.
Thank you for breaking all those pieces down. Councilmember Rinck, another public safety issue for you, if I could. A question from one of our viewers. Joe wants to know this. What is being done to keep our buses safe? You spoke at a recent gathering to honor Sean Yim, the Metro bus driver who was fatally stabbed by a rider in the U District last month. There was a convoy of buses that passed by City Hall to honor him just a short time before we recorded this program, actually. This is King County's Metro system, but a lot of people in Seattle use it, yourself included. What can the council do to keep buses safe?
Yeah, certainly. Well, some may know I actually don't own a car, and so I have no choice but to be using our public transit system, and I happily do it. It is incredible that we have a robust transit system, and there's absolutely improvements to be made, but it has served me, and it continues to serve many people across this city well. I think we have to recognize that we continue to see a number of conditions on our buses, social conditions, that reflect our lack of investment in being able to address them. So we see behavioral health challenges happening on our buses. Of course, we know there are a number of folks who are experiencing homelessness who may ride a bus all day because that's the warmest and safest place to be. These represent our failures to address these larger social issues. And so being able to make sure that we're partnering with the county to really confront the behavioral health challenges we see on the streets is huge, but also investing in affordable housing programs, namely 0 to 30 area median income housing to serve our lowest income community members, and building more housing. So really I see the city's role in this, given that our buses are King County, and we are clearly a partner and we buy service from them, but we also have a role to be playing in really investing and addressing these larger social issues facing our city.
Councilmember Rivera, this happened in D4. I know you went to the memorial recently for Sean.
Yes.
Tell me about this, your thoughts about this.
So I did. Well, I went to the candlelight vigil that the union had before the holidays, and then this morning I went to the memorial. I'm wearing Sean's number.
Yeah.
I did hear this morning, Metro said at the memorial that they will be installing, kind of enclosing the driver area.
Where they're sitting, yeah, okay.
They will be making that investment. I was happy to hear it. Obviously, that's not the only thing that needs to be done. I'll say that this council had, as part of this budget process, we included Councilmember Saka, led by Councilmember Saka, who chairs Transportation Committee, but also supported by those of us that were here, funding for security on the buses. So we did that. And we need to address, and this council has also supported as part of the budget process, ensuring that we have funding for human services. So we are addressing the homelessness issues, the mental health, and the drug addiction, because people need services and people need help, and that's what we need to make sure people have those services and not riding the buses and not getting the services that they need. So this council has supported those services, and I look forward to partnering with the county and my colleagues on what more we can do.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore, I only have a minute, but you've got some really interesting information you're trying to bring forward about how police control crowds, blast balls, things of this nature, these less lethal weapons. Can you try to explain where you want to guide this conversation and this legislation that the mayor's handed down?
Sure. Thank you very much. And I've been partnering with Councilmember Rinck on this issue. Clearly, public safety is incredibly important, and we need to be able to manage crowds if a riot happens. And we need to have a variety of tools that we can utilize. But blast balls, in 2020, we had the utilization of blast balls that resulted in serious injuries, resulted in a woman suffering cardiac arrest 3 times. Experts know that blast balls do carry a potential risk of lethality.
Yes.
So what my legislation would do is to say, comparable to tear gas, before SPD has the authority to utilize blast balls in a riot situation, the mayor has to give approval of that specifically.
Okay.
And the mayor has to declare a state of emergency, has to then specifically authorize blast ball use, and then make a new authorization each day to make sure that we are continuing to address the level of disorder appropriately. Yeah. So that's the main thing. The other important piece is also making sure that if we bring in law enforcement from other jurisdictions to assist us, that they have to agree to abide by Seattle's policies. Okay. If not, we can utilize them, but in a non-crowd control role.
Okay, thank you. I know there's a lot more ahead on that. That's all the time we have for now. We will see you next time on Council Edition.